we're launching Sky into new markets, we've had Google Analytics front and center of some of the decision-making processes.
One key part at the beginning was to look at users' review on the Play console so that we can be sure to have this connection with our players.
We use Google Ads to ask very specific questions, and this tells us where and how to spend money on advertising and find new players.
Enjoy new payment possibilities. Enjoy more per transaction. Enjoy expanding into new worlds. Enjoy it all across mobile, PC, and web. Enjoy the game. Welcome to Xsolla, a global video game commerce company.
Please welcome Chris Milicinos to the stage.
Hey, look at that. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of the GamesBeat Summit Next 2022. My name is Chris Milicinos, and I've spent more than 24 years in the games industry, working on Java technologies at Sun Microsystems to help power games like RuneScape and Minecraft, to helping to establish video games as an art form, as the guest curator for the Art of Video Games exhibition at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, to my current role at AWS, working alongside amazing and passionate colleagues to empower developers to bring their art, stories, and experiences to a global audience. And it is my privilege to be with you this morning as the MC for the final day of this amazing event. So I hope you enjoyed yesterday's sessions, and we've got an amazing lineup of content today. We're continuing conversations about the metaverse, diving deeper into esports, AI, AR, Web3, and much more. But the metaverse really presents an opportunity to fundamentally change the way we think about the inextricably interconnected world that we now all inhabit. With billions upon billions of network-connected devices that enable each of us to have a global voice and interact in ways that we couldn't possibly believe just 25 years ago, the concept of the metaverse and the possibility space it represents is extraordinary. It's the ability to blend our existence through any modality, experience, or destination between our digital and physical selves that will unlock the next era of utility, service, and empowerment that the metaverse represents. And I'm excited to join you in that journey, and we are the right industry to set that future in motion. And I can't wait to see the innovations that we unlock together for a metaverse future. And lastly, this event would not be possible without our incredible sponsors. So please, a round of applause for our sponsors for this event. Special thanks to our partners as well. Round of applause for our partners. And thanks to our advisory board that works really hard to make sure we bring together the best and brightest minds and speakers in our community to help set that path forward for us. So please, a round of applause for our advisory board. And of course, this event would not be possible without your support as well. All right, now please make sure to go ahead and download the VB Events app if you need more information about this event, and to make sure you download the app and view the full agenda and being able to network with other attendees. The official conference hashtag is #GBSummit, so join the conversation by using the #GBSummit tag or tag us at GamesBeat. We'd also like to thank Modulate. And Modulate builds intelligent voice technology that combats online toxicity and elevates the health and safety of online communities. ToxMod, Modulate's proactive voice moderation platform, empowers community teams to make informed decisions and protect players from harassment, toxic behavior, or more insidious harms. ToxMod is the only voice-native moderation solution available today and has processed millions of hours of audio for AAA game studios, indie developers, and console platforms alike. We'd like to thank John Connell, Hank Howie, and the Modulate team for their support of GamesBeat Summit Next. So thanks to Modulate for their support. And now I'd like to introduce Rachel Kaiser, gaming and technology writer at GamesBeat, for today's welcoming remarks.
Hello, everyone, and early happy Halloween. So, be honest, on a scale from Chris Pratt to Charles Martinet, how do you think I'm doing? I think I'm doing all right, yeah. Okay, gotta put this away, it's too powerful. So thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for coming out to day 2 of GamesBeat Summit Next. This is actually my first time attending this particular event in person. I started last year, a couple of weeks before that year's next event, so that was an introduction by fire. And that was also my first GamesBeat Women in Gaming breakfast, but at the time it was BYOB because, we couldn't actually eat breakfast together. So just as a personal story, I actually started in print media, if you can believe that. So I was fresh out of college. I just moved back in with my parents, like you do, and the local newspaper was hiring. So I had a byline in a print publication, and I thought, I was so proud. I thought it can never get better than this. Then my editor approached me about starting a column for the online version of the paper. The reason being they wanted to attract more readers to the digital space. That was where the interest and the audience was going at the time. I pitched a gaming column because, I was an unemployed 22-year-old, so video games were my life. And here we are today. Looking back on it now, I used gaming as a venue to enter into a digital space to engage with a forward-looking audience. Stretching the metaphor a little bit, but I think everyone at this conference can appreciate that, and I probably wasn't the only one who did it. Now, personally, I think gaming's past and present are crucial to talking about its future. I mean, just look at how the events of the recent past, like the pandemic, have shaped the view of the future that we hold now. But the events that led to us talking about the metaverse, NFTs, UGC, it goes back even further than that. I've been working in the gaming media space for several years now, and discussion about the metaverse has come on so gradually that it feels both like something new and something that's been around for a long time. And, that's exactly what it is. Now, when you're a consumer, your view of the future, at least when it comes to gaming, it's pretty blinkered because its innovation is something you can see or touch. The next game, the next console. It's hard to believe that anything could ever be bigger or more important than that. It wasn't until I started working in this space that I realized how short-sighted that view of the future really is. Now, in the time I've worked in the games industry, words like metaverse and blockchain have gone from ephemeral to necessary, from conceptual to imperative. Yesterday, you heard all about building the metaverse, in part from Neil Stephenson, the person who coined the term. We talked about how gaming is leading the movement into the metaverse, and how to handle the topic of safety when the younger generation enters this new era. You heard how users are creating the games and content they want, how they're even profiting from doing so, and how games that support user-generated content can build lasting communities. You heard about the immediate future of game streaming and the evolving relationship between game companies and Gen Z. And today, well, I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna hear a lot more about the metaverse. Don't start any drinking games involving the word metaverse. It would be a bloodbath. More specifically, we're talking about what's next for it. The people coming out right after me are talking about the craziest ideas for the metaverse, which is funny to me because the metaverse is already a pretty wild concept to me. And we're gonna spend time today talking about the economics of the metaverse and how blockchain and tokens will help us build the future. That also means, yes, we're gonna talk about NFTs. In fact, we have a whole panel on how to talk about NFTs without people getting mad at you. And sincerely, I wish them Godspeed with that. Today's cornucopia of topics also includes the future of esports, one of gaming's most successful industries. The next wave of games investing, AI and positive behavior, augmented reality, and the importance of diversity and inclusion in the industry, all important aspects of gaming's forward journey. I wish I could show that 22-year-old gamer just how far we've come and what the horizon looks like. This whole summit is about what comes next for gaming. In case the name didn't give that away. The summit is about the future, both the hopeful and the aspirational, and the inevitable. Everything we discuss here is either one or the other, and I leave it to each of our guests to determine which is which. Thank you, everybody, and please welcome Chris back to the stage.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, so to kick off day 2 of GamesBeat Summit Next, we have a fantastic session to get us thinking about the craziest ideas for the future of gaming and the metaverse. So please welcome to the stage Mark Long, the CEO of Shrapnel, Nils Wolny, the CEO of Holoride, Riz Verk, the founder of Play Labs at MIT, and sci-fi author Elliot Pieper.
I'm all about misguided passion. I've made a career such that it is out of really bad video game ideas. So I'm really excited to host such a fun panel. So there's bad ideas and good ideas, right? What are some of the best ideas that you really, really like in video game pitches?
What are some ideas that I really like that are out there today? I'd say, the whole play to earn has gotten a bit of a bad name, but I think, as the metaverse evolves, back in like 2007, 2008, when Second Life was big, people used to have jobs in Second Life, and they'd say, I have to show up at 8 o'clock at this bar, right? And that was kind of a key part of their income. And so I think, this merging of your work in the metaverse and getting paid in the metaverse for the work is a good idea long term, even though the economies of some of the games thus far haven't been well managed for that purpose.
I personally think one of the best ideas in gaming is combining the digital reality with the physical reality, so to create like fully immersive but connected to the real environment, real friends, real you, physical you, and create experiences that really connect to the space. I mean, there are a few very good examples out there already, but I think this is where a lot of things are heading, and I think is a pretty good idea to detach just from the screen but move into spaces and connect to people while playing games. So I'm excited about this personally.
So I'm a sucker for anything that combines creativity and play together. So, outside of gaming, I love listening to Song Exploder. It's a podcast that breaks down like exactly how a musician made every single sound in a given song, right? Or Chef's Table, a Netflix series where you get to see how things are made. And a couple days ago, I discovered a really cool new mobile game, Castle, which I'm sure people in this room probably know more about than I do. But the entire experience revolves around making a game on your phone that you then play on your phone. So if you're a player, the experience is like TikTok, where you're flipping through different games that other players are making all over the world. And there's been huge uptake just in the past couple months, especially in the Philippines and elsewhere, of people spending enormous amounts of time making experiences for each other and enjoying them through that shared space.
What about crazy bad ideas? What's some of the worst pitches you've heard?
Well, maybe we'll do the other round robin this way. I don't know if this is a crazy bad idea. It's just a straight up crazy idea. But there's a British physicist named David Deutsch, and his sort of way of looking at the world is that anything that isn't prohibited explicitly by the laws of nature is possible, and we can make it happen. And one of the examples he gives, and I'll sort of extend it here, is if you think about like generative AI out there today, where you can use GPT-3 to create natural language models and type in a prompt, and you basically pop out a paragraph or even an article. Same with AI generative art. And GitHub's Copilot, where you can use it to basically set up prompts to generate software code, that you could take that analogy further and further. As we get better and better at that, eventually you're not only going to be able to generate movies and games, right? But also, and not even just architectural plans, but actual buildings as you automate construction. And in his sort of long-term view, he even presents the idea that you could have a SimCity-like experience where you're terraforming an entire real planet.
From my perspective, honestly, there are no bad ideas. So I think it's all about the context and timing. Because when we started our own company back in We founded the company back in 2018, but in 2015, we came up with this concept to bring gaming to cars, but not just gaming, but VR in cars. And in 2015, when we had our first prototype, we had like gaming PCs in the trunk, a lot of chewing gum and duct tape, a wired DK2 from Oculus, and people just looked at us and said, guys, you're totally nuts, because people get VR sick, people get car sick, and now you're combining this. But minus times minus sometimes equals, or always equals plus, also in our case. And so everybody said, okay, but this is a crazy idea. 7 years down the road, suddenly it doesn't seem to be that crazy anymore. So I strongly believe there are no bad ideas. I like crazy ideas because crazy is just, it's unconventional. It's thinking outside the box, is going against the mainstream. And I think when I read the title of this panel, and thanks for the invitation, I said, okay, that's the place to be. Except that this is also a car dealership from the 50s, I learned. And the stage is called Ride, which is also cool, so I feel at home. But I would like to encourage everybody, if you think you have a bad idea or someone tells you you have a crazy bad idea, you might be onto something, so stick to it. So I don't think there are bad ideas.
Yeah, you know, I tend to agree that there are no bad ideas, but it's usually a matter of timing and practicality of different ideas. And, you know, it's hard to predict how technologies are going to not just evolve, but how they'll impact society. So as an example, speaking of cars, you know, I grew up in Detroit, the Motor City. And
I've never been there.
Well, you definitely need to be there. He has
guy.
Motorverse on his T-shirt there.
Yeah, it's not Motor City, it's Motorverse.
Right. So, you know, when automobiles first came out, they were worried that there was going to be a pollution problem. But not the pollution problem that we have today. They were worried that there was going to be too much dust kicked up by these cars because all the roads were built for horses. And, you know, they were all dirt roads at that point. They weren't paved. And so, you know, it's pretty difficult to figure out how these things might evolve. Now, in terms of crazy ideas, I've had a lot of crazy ideas pitched to me. You know, one area that I'm quite interested in is the brain-computer interface, so we can talk more about that later. And some people use EEGs, some people use EMGs. And I had one group pitch me where they were using the sweat off of your hand somehow to figure out what you were thinking and doing, and I thought that was kind of crazy, and you know, but you never know. It turns out there's usage for that because when you sweat, it actually dampens, you know, the EEG and the EMG signals, and so it's a different way to get at that information. So it seemed crazy at first, but the more they explained it, the more I thought, okay, there's an interesting technology here. Who knows where it'll lead? Yeah.
You know, you reminded me with your anecdote about Detroit and the dust. That at the end of the 19th century in New York City, it was an urban crisis because at that point, everything was done with horses, right? So horses brought carts in with food from the countryside. Horses tried to bring waste out. Like if you wanted to go to your friends for dinner, you were riding a horse. And the city was just covered in manure. And the manure problem was so bad that no one knew what to do. So all the experts at the time believed that there was an upper limit on urban growth because of the amount of manure that would pile up and rot in the city and cause disease. And they brought together a panel of experts from all over the world to try to solve this problem. And they held this symposium in New York State and brought together everyone, urban planners, engineers, the whole bit, to say, hey, like, how are we going to solve the manure problem so that we can still build large cities in the world? And the symposium ended, and their conclusion of all of these experts was that it was impossible and that no one would live in major cities in the 20th century. And about 15 years later, you had cars completely replacing horses in New York. And obviously, we're now maybe living through, you know, climate change, which was a result of switching to fossil fuel, but I think that really speaks to when you're thinking about crazy ideas and how they shape the future, how we may be up here positing them, but like everyone in this room is going to be generating them, and none of us are going to be able to imagine the full spectrum of possibility.
I'd like to pick this up because, I mean, today cars are all about transportation, getting you from A to B, but now the metaverse as spatial computing solution emerging, we potentially might not necessarily need to travel somewhere physically anymore in the future. So rethink the car. because it's a very private space. It's connected to the real world. You have like the haptics of the motion. You have a lot of sensors, actuators, smell, sound, light, everything in there. It's still a very private space. I'm pretty sure most of you have observed it on a freeway when there's a traffic jam. You look next to the other lane and everybody looks and behaves like nobody could see them. So you see the strangest things because it's like your personal cocoon, your personal sphere. So rethinking the car, maybe it turns into an experience gaming device. So you get into a car not to travel from A to B, but to experience something because it's so physical, such a unique experience you can't have at home because you won't have a simulator at home. But yeah, we never know. So maybe this completely changes too.
I've always wanted to make a drug dealer MMO game. Which is
Let's talk about it. No, just kidding.
Which is just disastrously conceived, right? What about you? What games have you always wanted to make but have never been able to get greenlit?
I write science fiction novels, so I don't have a game that I've actually never pitched a game.
What book did your editors just say absolutely not?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that this goes where you were starting off with there's no such thing as a bad idea. When I pitch a book to my editors and they decline, I hire my own team and put it out indie. And so I really double down on the fact that there are no bad ideas. Yeah. Maybe I'll flip your question and give you a sneak preview of a new story I'm working on, which is, and the reason why I want to mention it is because it was inspired by a game. I'm sure many folks in the audience have played SimCity 2000. And I always loved the fact that whether you got there honestly or like me by like inputting every cheat code you could possibly want, so you had infinite resources to spend, you would wind up with the arcologies, those huge sort of like space age buildings that had like glass domes on top, and they were basically like a city in a building. And here in the Bay Area, we've had a housing crisis that's been going on for a long time. Actually, there's good news this year that we've passed a bunch of state laws that are hopefully going to help with that. But it got me thinking about density and how interesting density is in an urban space. And so I'm now working on a story where the entire Bay Area gets condensed and distilled into a single arcology on the peninsula in San Francisco, where everyone in the whole urban space lives there and everything else is rewilded. So inspired by SimCity 2000.
That is a terrible idea.
Perfect. And I know I'm going to publish
it. Stick to it. Stick to it. That's great. Yeah, actually, we don't build games ourselves. What we are doing, we are providing a platform for developers to create for cars. So we call it Elastic SDK. It plugs into the Unity game engine, and then you're in your familiar environment, and you can start building for the car. So we enable creators out there, and especially because our platform launches in 2 weeks in Germany, a few weeks later in the US. I'll keep you posted on this, but we work very closely with indie developers. We love indie developers because they come up with the most craziest ideas that are possible based on the technology we give to them. And they really think outside the box what's possible if you're traveling the real world in a car. Suddenly it unlocks new potential for storytelling, for gameplay. And I love the ideas that are getting pitched to us. And as I said, there are no bad ideas. I think they're all super interesting, and I wait for more of those, honestly. But we don't build games ourselves.
Well, combining this idea of books and games, I wrote a book a few years ago called The Simulation Hypothesis, and the way I came to write about the idea that we might already be inside a video game, which would be the ultimate video game, was I was playing a ping pong game in virtual reality. This was back in 2016, so it was still a wired headset. It was still kind of clumsy, but the ping pong game felt so realistic because the physics engine was so good that I tried to put the paddle down on the table at the end of the game, and I tried to lean against the table, and of course, the controller fell to the floor. I almost fell over, and I thought, And the graphics weren't even that good, in terms of photorealism in the game, but it was the responsiveness that fooled my brain. So I began to think about what are the stages of technology we would need to develop to build a game that is completely indistinguishable from physical reality. And so, that led me to write a book about this idea that we may already be inside that ultimate video game. And of course, no publisher wanted to publish it, so I had to do the entrepreneurial thing. So whenever you have gatekeepers in any industry, whether it's games or within publishing, within television and film, you always have kind of these guys who are looking at the old paradigms. And so in this case, I was both envisioning how we could build this game, but then that led to bigger philosophical, religious ideas. And so it ended up being just a very interdisciplinary discussion about what I think would be the ultimate game, a game where you really could not tell the difference, like The Matrix. So, yeah.
How about the metaverse? Isn't the idea of high-performance co-presence in a troll-free environment crazy talk itself?
Honestly, I think finally with the term metaverse, we have agreed on a term that is a little bit more consumer-friendly compared to spatial computing. But I think in the current discussion, very often it's completely limited to a completely virtual space somewhere, not necessarily connected to your physical world or your physical reality. And it's all about meeting other people. And yeah, of course, there are some influences from games, but I think it's the focus is too narrow of what it can be. So I think once we move more towards a future where everybody thinks about, okay, what kind of spatial applications can we have? How do we interact in this space? Because currently we take the paradigms from screens into VR also a little bit. There will be infinite possibilities. So I think the current discussion is a little limited to what it can be in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, of the statements you made, the troll-free part might actually be the hardest. The rest are technical problems, right?
Yeah.
And that now you get into social issues and standards of behavior, right? Which are either enforced by the platform or, there are social standards that are agreed upon, like in Second Life. You weren't supposed to, teleport out of a house because they might think you crashed. Because in those days, there was a lot of crashing going on. And so, there was a standard of going outside and then teleporting to where you're going. We had Neil Stephenson here last night, and, they had this rule where avatars couldn't be larger or taller than you are, so that you wouldn't have these 100-foot avatars. And so, there's a lot of different, I think, non-technical issues that are still very difficult to figure out how we're going to build those. But I think whether it's going to be called the metaverse, right? Everybody has a different definition of the metaverse now. In the same way that cyberspace, is now used as a generic term for anything that's online. And so I think the way a lot of people here in the game industry talk about the metaverse, have been talking about it being somewhere inside this virtual reality space or Web3, but we may end up with a bunch of different metaverses. So it's not clear exactly how that term is going to be used in the future as well, I think.
It's sort of funny because you mentioned Neil Stephenson with coining the metaverse, and cyberspace was coined by William Gibson in the 80s, another science fiction writer. It's sort of interesting because I sort of think of them as the same thing. Like the words change, right? But I think that like the exciting thing at the base of it is that computing is just playing a larger and larger and larger role in our lives, right? And like not just individual computers, but connected computers with the internet, and now much, much richer experiences that we're able to create today. And so when I think about like the future of the metaverse, I just think of that extended, right? That right now, like, I mean, literally driving here today, I was using Google Maps, which now seems boring and prosaic, right? But like, I wouldn't have arrived here without it. And that's a really, really basic example, but basically every single activity that we do every day, from actually before you wake up, like your alarm is a computer, right? So like we are immersed in compute all day long for every aspect of our lives, and and that's in our personal lives all the way up to like the Biden administration and the geopolitics of chip fabrication and TSMC, right? So, like computing has become central to human civilization, and I think that membrane is just going to get richer and richer and richer over time. So I think that folks who look back, like there's sort of two parallel misconceptions that people have when they think about the future of the metaverse. The first is that they try to disconnect it from like computing in general and the internet and other previous terms like cyberspace. Like they try to treat it as a neologism, like that there's actually something new here. It's actually an extension of what's already here. But the other parallel thing that people miss is that we're just at the beginning, right? It's easy to look at the world and say, well, computers are already everywhere, right? Like we've arrived. And like, no, we haven't arrived at all. Like we're just at the beginning of a really, really long journey with many different paths ahead.
Yeah.
And I think those choices are going to be really exciting.
Yeah. What's a crazy use case that you'd really love to see in the metaverse?
Well, maybe to take that like a step further, like one thing I've thought a lot about is as computing becomes a core part of like all the work we do, like literally everyone in this room relies on computers for their work, that allows us to work at higher and higher levels of abstraction. I was talking about generative AI before, right? Like now you can use ML to vastly increase your own agency in making things in the world. But there's a downside to that, right? Now we're all expected to try to distill and integrate and synthesize in our own minds vast amounts of data. The world is so complicated, and we are now exposed to that data in so many different ways all the time that we now need to interface with the real world through computer interfaces that are basically games. So if you think about, I don't know, like a hedge fund manager or a Wall Street trader today looking at a bunch of disconnected charts and stock charts, like annual reports, company financials, industry trend reports, what they're really trying to do is access deep patterns that they can bet on to make a bet on the future, right? And there's no reason that if what they're looking for is a deep pattern and if they want to ingest more and more data, why don't you have AI doing the reverse and starting to do that digestion for them? So if you are that hedge fund manager and you show up at work tomorrow, rather than looking at a bunch of disconnected charts, you could aggregate that data into, I don't know, like a simulation of an ocean, and you're literally piloting a boat across it, and the chart that you course defines the investment strategy that your algorithms are taking. So I think that as we move into the future, more and more of our work, like that's just one weird example. You could come up with 1,000, but much more of human work is going to appear to be play. That much more of the tools we use are going to feel like games, and that because of that, the games industry is going to have an outsized impact on all of our lives.
Yeah.
Can I add, going on this AI use case, like for me, I think an interesting use case of the metaverse that often gets overlooked is residents of the metaverse, right? In a sense, if the metaverse will exist, we are going to be visitors to the metaverse, right? We're not going to be logged in with our avatars all the time. Yet, there will be residents of the metaverse who are there all the time. Today, we think of them as NPCs in games, and when I was a kid, I used to wonder when I was playing my Atari, what happens to those characters when I log off? And so I think, AI, the metaverse can actually be the place where AGI develops first. And the reason is, if you think of the way we understand the world, it's an embodied intelligence that we have. I mean, GPT-3, GPT-4, 5, 6, they can take a bunch of text and they can put it together and they can give you the right response and say, oh yeah, I was in a swimming pool and I did X. But you know that AI has never been in a swimming pool and doesn't really know what that's all about. On the other hand, in the metaverse, you can let your AI learn and have actual experiences so that the AI could, while you're not logged in, learn what it's like to take a class, to go into a swimming pool. If you look at how we're training self-driving cars, right, to get back to the car example, Tesla announced it has an ultra-realistic version of San Francisco, and that's where it's going to train the self-driving cars. Why? Well, obviously it's safer to train self-driving cars in the metaverse, but you can go through at what are called hothouse speeds. You can learn much more quickly. So I think an interesting use case of the metaverse will just be a place for AI to become sentient. And what is a self-aware AI, right? We all remember the line from Terminator where, Skynet became self-aware on August 29, 1997, or whenever it was. But, there are tests for self-awareness, whereas if you put a dot like on an animal, like a dog, a red dot, and it looks in the mirror and it realizes that dot is on itself, then it's becoming self-aware. And so to become self-aware, you have to have some kind of a boundary. You have to have some kind of a body. And guess what? Now we have avatars that are powered by AI. You have chatbots with metahumans being combined like Cookie.ai. So if you just let those guys loose, there are companies now building pets in the metaverse. And there was a great story from Ted Chiang, the guy who wrote The Arrival, the life cycle of software objects, about what happens to these pets later on down the road when the companies that made the metaverse is shut down. But I think that's a really interesting use case that we're not really thinking about, but it might be, in the end, the most profound aspect of what the metaverse brings us.
Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to really the merge of physical reality and digital reality to create new and playful applications, and detach a little bit from this. It needs to be VR sense, because you could also walk the streets and there could be sound files that influence your experience, that gamify your journey or your social experience. So I think there are so many opportunities just in combining these two aspects, and I think this where the magic will happen in the future, with this seamless connection, whether it's all the different technologies. I mean, when we started, we were always put into the bucket, okay, we are a VR startup, but we build a motion location-aware platform for experiences in cars, and I think this is where we will see, hopefully, more applications, more crazy ideas being explored, because this is really enriching, and I personally just love this combination.
Well, you've heard it here first. There's no crazy ideas. You can pitch that with confidence next time you're on Sand Hill Road talking to venture capitalists. Thank you for joining me for this panel. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Mark, Nils, Riz, and Elliot. Now next, please welcome Mark Pincus, the former founder and CEO of Zynga, in a fireside chat with Dean Takahashi, the lead writer at GamesBeat, and we'll hear why Pincus thinks blockchain could offer the way for the games industry to deliver on the original vision for social gaming, and how to find the right place, meaning, and value of games in our daily lives.
Thank you, everybody, and very happy to have Mark Pincus back here again. He started Zynga in 2007, and I believe the last time you were on a GamesBeat stage was 2012. And I remembered we also went over to Zynga to eat your food.
I'll be back in a little.
The cafeteria, so thank you for
Probably a lot of people here have eaten our food.
Yeah.
Hey.
One of the big things that happened this year was that Take-Two bought Zynga for $12.7 billion. Right? Oh.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Can you guys hear? Okay.
Can you hear us?
So can you tell us about the sale of Zynga to Take-Two, and then what's your perspective on the macroeconomic environment, and how did that influence your decision to sell?
Sure. Well, part of the title of the talk was I think there's so many interesting parallels between this moment that we're in the gaming industry today and what it looked like in 07 and 08. And in 07, when I was getting started in gaming, it was actually mature, not a growth industry. It was not about mass market. And there was a lot of consolidation, and there was a lot of benefits to having scale. And it was really hard to break in. And that's why when social networks opened up, it gave this new chance for disruption. Bing, who's here, who's been my board member and friend, godparent to my kids now, we met around then when he was at EA. And as we've looked at the evolution of the game industry and talked to Frank Gibeau, who's been the CEO of Zynga, we've thought that it's headed towards a place that's really positive, that we'll probably see a handful or more of $100 billion market cap game companies, those who can get to scale. And Zynga and Take-Two together look like a really strong contender to go and be one of those scale players. At the same time, it's arguably never been harder to more money, more time to break into the game industry, or it's at least as hard, it feels as hard to some of us as 07 and 08. And so, you know, it's a really interesting moment.
And was there other sort of smaller things like, you know, like the macro economy, like there wasn't a recession coming when you guys were talking here, right? But there kind of is one now. Does it like sort of look in hindsight that maybe this was a good move at the time, right? Really to
Sure, I think from a market perspective, and you know, the equity markets are a pretty tough environment, and so it was also, you know, a good outcome for Zynga shareholders. You know, it positioned both companies. I think it was a real win-win for both companies.
Yeah. But I guess earlier this year when the deal was announced, you did say that this was bittersweet for you.
Yes.
So why was it bittersweet?
Well, and I think a lot of people here are probably also founders, and you set out with this vision of what you want to create, and if you're really, really, really lucky and work hard and everything goes your way, you actually start achieving that vision, and it's a pretty amazing high. And we did for a moment. I think everyone can remember there was a moment in 2010 and 11 and 12 where the vision we had for Zynga was that busy adults, not just people who love games, but our friends and family would be playing games together, and they were. And the irony of where we are today is that there's more people than ever playing games. The industry is bigger than I ever could have imagined, and there's more minutes, more money spent, but we're not playing games with our friends and family anymore. And a lot of the busy adults have gone back to being busy, and the games often feel like empty calories and not a good use of your time. And part of the vision that Bing and I worked on was, can a game improve your relationship with somebody? Can a game give you a new dimension that you could express yourself? And it is happening in places like Roblox, but it's gone away from that place where it was my mom and my family doing it.
We're staring down at our phones.
Yeah, we're staring at our phones a lot, but the phones are, it's questionable how much time they're connecting us to other people in meaningful ways.
Interesting. And then the platforms, how did they impact, you know, the trajectory of getting to the vision of everybody playing?
Well, I think we all have this love-hate relationship with the platforms that I'm guessing Bing could tell us predates my experience, probably a long time with EA too, that the new platform is this amazing, wonderful thing. It's magical for developers, for users, that when social networks opened up, when we first saw the iPhone, it was this magical thing, and all of a sudden there was new dimensions that we could create on, and there's so many opportunities everywhere, and the users are in a discovery phase, and oh, did you see this? And people are sharing. But then as it gets more mature, it both becomes a bigger business, but there tends to be less discovery, less new growth, less interest in new. And the platforms we see with Apple's announcements this week start to tighten the vice a bit, and they're maximizing their revenues, and they're not necessarily motivated to deliver us as developers more services or even directly to the end users. And so there's this weird relationship that we start getting resentful of the platforms that we're on.
It's almost like a taxation as opposed to some authentic interest that they have in games.
Yeah, it's taxation without representation, right? Like, what have you done for me lately? Like, I should feel good about paying you 30%. Make it, imagine if it was opt-in. I used to say to Facebook too, imagine if the 30% was such a good deal for me as a developer that I wanted it. I didn't have to take it. Imagine if Apple gave us so many great things if you paid the 30% that you were like, shit, I'm happy to pay 30% because I get more distribution and all these cool services that make my games better.
So it sounds like there's some unfinished business, I guess. And now you're interested in blockchain gaming, and do you think blockchain gaming represents a different opportunity?
I think blockchain gaming could be that new level of disruption at the platform level that we've been hoping for. Similar, but maybe much bigger to what social gaming was. And when I look at the parallels again, I think there's more users with wallets today than there were users on Facebook in 2007. And they have wallets, like they actually have a way to pay, and there's a model. There's more margin available for us as developers, and we have ways that we could turn that into value for the end users that are completely new and innovative. And there's more upside. If you make it as a developer and you create a Fortnite or a hit game, you have the chance to be a platform yourself. And so why isn't there a Tencent of the West? Why is there only a Tencent of China? Well, it's there structurally because you're limited. Fortnite, Roblox, the leaders cannot easily be an app store on top of these platforms, and that potential is there, on blockchain. But there's a lot of things missing, right? There's no clear, easy distribution where it was there with Facebook, and we don't yet have the breakthrough hit games.
But decentralization and a way around big tech is actually a real opportunity.
Yeah. It could be hugely disruptive.
Okay. So what needs to happen then for blockchain to get to becoming a mainstream game platform?
Well, if I go to, there's three things that we thought about a lot in building our games and trying to give adults to give themselves permission to play that I really think are possible in blockchain. And one is making the virtual feel real. And you said, I sent Dean his first copy of Ready Player One. I also sent it to Zuck. I'll take credit, minor credit. Tried to buy the movie rights and couldn't get that. I think we would have made a better movie. Sorry, Steven Spielberg. But one is making the virtual feel real, and I think we all see interesting ways blockchain can do that. The second is a sense of persistence and place, and we also see that happening a lot. And the third that might be less intuitive is this sense of giving our players and users a way to invest, express, and connect through their gameplay. So I think all those could be in place with the blockchain. And I would also just say that the way that we built, people forget the way that we built our games and the social gaming industry was not about a single hit game. It was about the underlying mechanics that game brought us.
So we've already seen some hits like Axie Infinity rise and fall. They've subsided now. And can blockchain games be sustainable hits that get to a mass market?
Well, that gets to this point I'm trying to make, which is if we'd freeze framed on where social gaming was in '07 or in '08, there were these pop and drops. There was Jetpack Joyride was the gigantic hit game, and they got killed by Christmas. People went away for the holidays and came back and forgot to play, and no one ever heard of it again. And what we see, what each of these games brought in the early days of social gaming was they gave us this new, what Bing and I call golden mechanic. And that's what I would encourage everyone here to pay attention to. Scrabulous gave us turn-based, asymmetrical gameplay. And it blew our minds at the time. I know it sounds crazy today. Playfish with Restaurant City gave us this idea that you could hire your friends to play in your game. They built on that asymmetry, sorry, not asymmetry, asynchronous, meaning for the first time, I didn't have to be there in the same time and on the same couch or whatever. I could play with my mom and she could take her turn when she felt like it. And those were such key building blocks, even of where mobile gaming is today. And so now I see some signs of that. I think that I saw CryptoKitties in the beginning and I was blown away. I said, oh my God, someone actually made an interesting game out of blockchain and a collectible and an interesting thing people are spending money on other than just buying tokens. This feels big. And I cold emailed them and I said, Rohan, I'm blown away, can I invest? And I put up some of the first money. And then I'm walking around my CryptoKitties t-shirt and Dan, who's here, and my team were making fun of me. They're like, Mark, that's so 2017. Don't wear that, that's embarrassing. But that team went on to build, as we've seen, much bigger things with Flow and getting the NBA, Top Shot. So I think Axie is another, what I think they gave us a golden mechanic in play to earn. Even though it didn't sustain, I think it proved that there's some real heat there.
But there's a lot of people also made fun of Axie not being a real game, just like they did with Farmville.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was never asked to speak at GDC. They said, you don't make games, what are you doing?
That's crazy. But so as far as like getting to the metaverse then, like, we've heard on this stage, from Neil Stephenson yesterday, people have a lot of different concepts of what the metaverse is, like how do you define it and where will we experience it?
Well, the first thing I would say about, again, like, where are we in cycles, economic cycles, capital cycles, and this possible Web3 and blockchain cycle, where it's such a similar moment that it was very hard to get funding in '07 and '08. I mean, the first round for Zynga, we were doing $200,000 a month in cash flow, not revenues. It's a foreign concept. We were growing at 30% month on month. I cannot tell you, no VC wanted to fund us. Nobody. And finally, I got Fred Wilson, who's just funded everything I've done, and he begrudgingly gave us money at 15 million pre. Like, that's like an embarrassing safe note today. So the similarity, it's not that bad today at all. Happy to, I think everyone knows that. But I think we got to get pragmatic, and even though we're going after these big visionary concepts that are super exciting and could be huge, I think the next 2 years is going to be about pragmatism and actually hunkering down and getting to product experiences and real economies, real experiences that connect the dots and are sustainable and make sense to people other than just the people in this room. The way I think about the metaverse is, to me, the metaverse is the build and browse interface on top of this new decentralized infrastructure, and that can happen anywhere. And Bing and I were at a dinner with a bunch of metaverse thinkers, and there was kind of the Meta Facebook point of view, which is it's all going to be this amazing future inside of a goggle. And I think that is amazing and probably will happen, but I also think we'll get the metaverse on our phones. It's already kind of starting through Upland, but so I think it's more about connecting us to this decentralized infrastructure in ways that have real value.
So when do we get to mass market metaverse?
Well, I think that this pragmatism, this real value, we're kind of in a perfect place. It's good that speculative bubbles aren't funding things and everyone has to hunker down because we have to build some real shit now. Okay, that's good, I think. So my lens is slightly different than what I'm hearing from people, which doesn't mean it's right. My instinct is that we're going to get to the metaverse through games first. And the way we're going to prove value to our daughters, our friends who give zero shits about this room, any of this stuff, crypto trading, is by delivering ease and automation. And I think that's the real unlock here. And when in a game, if I'm in Roblox, my kids were addicted to Adopt Me, it gave them this level of ease and automation. They could create a Domino's pizza and be a delivery or real life things, but really fast. And my daughter, Carmen, has been trying to build this comfy fancy store for 3 years, since she was 9. And I'm trying my best to just let her do it, not do it for her, which I wouldn't be much better than her anyway. And I think, what if she got this in Roblox or somewhere and it was as easy and fun as Minecraft, Adopt Me, but as powerful as Shopify. So it did IRL things, and it just was a natural evolution. And I think that's possible, but I think it's got to get to that before she says, cool, I'm on the metaverse.
Yeah. When you say automation, like I was at a dinner last night and everybody was sort of talking about generative art and, DALL-E, and it's all where AI is progressing, and all of Silicon Valley seems to be talking about this now. Has that made an impression on you in some way?
I'm super excited about what AI can do. My instinct is that we're going to fake it first before we make it, and that we'll do that in games, that we will build the feeling of bots, and everything Will Wright talked about yesterday is mind-blowing and interesting. My guess is that we'll probably get to mind-blowing experiences in a more hardwired way first for people, and with a little bit of more algorithmic, heuristic things before we get to the AI. But I think the AI will eventually deliver mind-boggling things.
And then Mark Zuckerberg has a vision for the metaverse too, and your old platform partner. What role do you think Meta is going to play?
Well, I heard that Yacht was here and told you he loves how much Mark's investing and he's not investing enough. I can't agree more. I think that it's awesome and courageous what he's doing. I mean, we've got to at least hand it to him that he is betting it all and withstanding enormous pressure, and it might pay off for him. It's a big, big, long bet. What I'd say is he could end up being the next coming of Apple or the next coming of Xerox PARC. Either way, it's good for the industry. And my take, not that he needs my advice at all, is that he's going to get there if he deeply partners with people in this room, with content creators, in a way the way he did with Zynga, that the platforms are notoriously bad at making games, and there's very, very few examples other than like a Nintendo of someone creating a platform and creating the best games and content on it, but that's what we need. And it's frustrating being a platform, be like, Steve Jobs grabbed me, hooked his hand around my neck after I showed Farmville for the iPhone 4, and there's many rows deep of photographers around him, and he said, "Pincus, come here." And he grabbed me and walked down the hall, and he said, when is Farmville's art and software and everything going to be native? Don't you realize the fidelity that you could be having? And I was like, well, we're on Flash, and we're connecting it to Facebook. He's like, that is a waste of time. Why aren't you doing this? And even Steve Jobs, was frustrated that we weren't using his platform enough, and Zuck must be a bit too. And part of it is, I think, we need the he needs to either fall in love with making games or be very close to others who are in love with it.
I mean, I do think Mark Zuckerberg at least has identified the right competition. I mean, Apple is the contender, and like once they move into this space, you know, it may be all over for everybody else, right? And with, you know, the moves that Apple has been making, you know, the privacy push over targeted advertising, the move this week to basically tax social, they're competitive moves against Meta to put more pressure on them.
Well, they do put more pressure. You know, they could undercut Facebook, Meta, and it's ironic, you know, a little bit of irony that Zuck is feeling the pain of living on someone else's platform. You know, he should love even more this idea of, you know, a trustless platform that nobody can own or tax anybody, right?
The open metaverse is his
The open
escape
metaverse.
route.
Yeah. He should be like, I've seen the light. Let's all do this. Come on.
Yeah. Well, he's saying that. I guess the trust issue is a challenging one, though.
Well, we shouldn't have to trust a platform, a corporation, you know, a founder. We should have true platforms should be completely, you know, independent and immutable, and they should be driven by, you know, by developers, end users, and market forces.
Does this mean we should expect another Zynga from you?
I would say I loved working with small teams, you know, like Manuel who's here, and building products and games and trying to figure out emergent new platforms. And I would really love, that's my life passion, and I really want to get back to it.
Mm-hmm. And you've done a lot of investing in startups too. Like what advice do you have for investors?
Well, I know there's a few investors here too, like Phil Sanderson, who I'm an investor in his fund, so go talk to him. I think for investors, it's such an interesting time, and I think I'm positive that there will be some entrepreneurs and some companies out of here that are become massive, but I think I'll predict that the winners are going to be a combination. There'll be some that get to amazing early traction, like an Axie, but more I would bet on the teams, and I would look at that early traction or that product experience the way I did in Dapper, more as like a resume for the team. And I think it's going to be the teams that have the best ability to execute, learn the fastest, and get the most best shots on goal that I would bet end up, you know, being the big winners. And I think they could be really big winners. I think that the stakes here, the ones that win, go far beyond what were in front of us in social gaming. And it's great that Zynga ended up being a $12 or $13 billion company, but you know, there is a chance for the Robloxes of the world or somebody here that cracks this code to be, you know, the next Apple. I mean, to be just really, really big companies. But, you know, I heard Satya, one of the first times I heard him speak about the new ethos at Microsoft, and he said, to win as a platform, we need to deliver 10x value to everyone on top of our platform to what we get. And I think that's going to be true here, that the winning platform will be delivering an ecosystem that is maybe 100 times more valuable than they are.
Maybe it's a mobile Xbox platform, right?
Yeah, maybe it's, you know, a $300 billion company that supports, you know, a $3 trillion economy.
And then last question then, what's your advice to a young person who wants to build a career in the game industry?
I would say go put yourself in a position where you get to be working on a lot of shots on goal against these emergent areas, and you're learning really fast. And you're a company that has a lot of growth and a lot of need and is going to give you way too much responsibility too early, and that's kind of where Zynga was during the rocket ship phase. You want to be like, they're insane. Like they should not be giving me this responsibility, and I'm not sleeping at night because I'm thinking about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So thank you, Mark and Dean, for that fantastic discussion. We're going to take a short break right now. We'll be back at 11 a.m. with Brad Oberwager of Tila on this stage and breakout sessions on the Gods and Monsters stage across the venue. So we'll see you all after the break.
we're launching Sky into new markets, we've had Google Analytics front and center of some of the decision-making processes.
One key part at the beginning was to look at users' review on the Play console so that we can be sure to have this connection with our players.
We use Google Ads to ask very specific questions, and this tells us where and how to spend money on advertising and find new players.
Enjoy new payment possibilities. Enjoy more per transaction. Enjoy expanding into new worlds. Enjoy it all across mobile, PC, and web. Enjoy the game. Welcome to Xsola, a global video game commerce company.
launching Sky into new markets, we've had Google Analytics front and center of some of the decision-making processes.
One key part at the beginning was to look at users' review on the Play console so that we can be sure to have this connection with our players.
We use Google Ads to ask very specific questions, and this tells us where and how to spend money on advertising and find new players.
Enjoy new payment possibilities. Enjoy more per transaction. Enjoy expanding into new worlds. Enjoy it all across mobile, PC, and web. Enjoy the game. Welcome to Xsola, a global video game commerce company.
launching Sky into new markets, we've had Google Analytics front and center of some of the decision-making processes.
One key part at the beginning was to look at users' review on the Play console so that we can be sure to have this connection with our players.
We use Google Ads to ask very specific questions, and this tells us where and how to spend money on advertising and find new players.
The session will be beginning shortly. Please silence all devices.
Enjoy new payment possibilities. Enjoy more per transaction.
Please take your seat. The session is about to begin.
Enjoy expanding into new worlds. Enjoy it all across mobile, PC, and web. Enjoy the game. Welcome to Xsola, a global video game commerce company.
Welcome back to the stage, Chris Melisinos.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. So we're very pleased to welcome to the stage Brad Oberwager, the executive chairman of TILA, in a fireside chat with Dean Takahashi. And they'll discuss the broad trends in virtual economies, as well as better defining the unique opportunity presented by token-based economies. So Brad, Dean?
Thank you for doing this, Brad. I guess we'll start with like how Linden Lab developed its ability to handle payments and the history of Tilia here.
So the history of Tilia is really the history of Second Life. So Second Life way back when, just for review, so Second Life is still going on. It's a $650 million economy, and it actually is a pretty big business. So when Second Life was started, it was merely a way to build things, right? That's what people love doing. And it just was the original gaming engine that allowed people to create. And so it was where the original creators were. But what they did was they allowed people to run a credit card, buy a Linden dollar, move the Linden dollar, and then let the Linden dollar come out of the system. That was very prescient and very interesting. It was also very illegal. So that's called money transmission. And money transmission is a highly regulated thing in the world, the United States, especially the EU, Australia, Japan. And so they were told to stop doing it. And instead of stopping, they built this company called Tilia, which went out and got all the licenses to move money virtually in these virtual worlds. Now, there was only one real virtual world back then, so they used Second Life as the way to get those licenses. Now, Tilia became its own company, and then what we did very recently was we separated the two. And so that's the origin of Tilia.
But you also came into the picture here too. Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, so Philip Rosedale was the founder, and Philip and I, we go to Burning Man every year, and we actually, like, it's not like the two of us go to Burning Man. Lots of people do that. We actually drive up in an RV together. And every year I would hear about Linden, and they wanted to sell it, and they couldn't sell it, and they wanted to sell it. And after like 3 years, I was like, if you talk about this one more time, I'm just gonna buy it. And he did, and so we actually stepped in and bought Linden, which at that time was both Second Life and Tilia, and they were absolutely connected.
And now you've done a more recent transaction. We just announced it. Tell us.
Yeah. And thanks for helping us announce it last week. So what we did was we took that company Tilia, which was only supporting Second Life, and we split them apart. And now Tilia started supporting other virtual worlds, metaverse gaming companies, because what's happening is as times are changing and the desire to move money, people are learning that it's actually very regulated. We actually split it out. And then JP Morgan came in and funded it, which is, very powerful. So they're leading a round. It's actually, we announced JP Morgan, but the round is like open. Like we're doing the round right now. It's already a profitable company, so we just kind of.
So what's the opportunity at hand then?
Sorry?
Oh, what's the opportunity at hand from this particular deal, I guess?
Everyone's read Matt Ball, and so let's assume that we all agree with him as a start. We have a lot of experience in these virtual worlds, and what we've learned. And I think we have like a lot of experience. Like we've been doing this for 20 years. And so we see these crypto games and blockchain games and stuff, and we're not saying yes or no to them. But what we've learned is that the virtual worlds mimic the real world quite closely, actually. You get a sense of place, a sense of self. There are rules and governments, DAOs, but in our case, the community rules, it's slightly different. So they mimic a lot of society. But But every society has, throughout all of history, has depended on money in some way, shape, or form to blossom, right? So you're good at what you're good at, I'm good at what I'm good at. We both separate, we do it, and then we have to exchange. So even barter is a type of exchange. Money is a much easier way to do it. So the opportunity at hand is that we believe that moving your stuff is important. So moving your identity and your friends is important, but that moving your money might actually be the most important. Like if you live in San Francisco and I tell you you have to move to New York and you can't bring your clothes, that is mildly irritating for some people. I'd love to buy new clothes, but so that's mildly irritating. But if I told you you can't bring your money and you have to start over, you're not gonna move. And so the movement of money, both in these worlds, is incredibly important. You cannot have a creator economy. Like if we step back, you can't build a virtual world. You have to let the creators do it. They do not do it for free. And so moving that money within the world with these money transmitter licenses, moving the money between worlds, that's what's gonna drive most, in our opinion, of course, you're good with a hammer, it looks like a nail. Most of what we believe is that money is going to be the underpinning of the picks and axes, which are going to be the underpinning of the virtual worlds, right? So, so that's kind of what we think the opportunity is hand. I mean, you know, if you read the press, it's going to be somewhere between $2 and $8 trillion. The interesting thing is how little people truly understand the movement of money in the world. If you're good at games, you think you can just sell virtual currency and everything will be fine. And the reality is that is not even close to being true. And unlike making a mistake when you're VC backed or when you're building something, you make a mistake, things don't work out. When you're moving money and you make a mistake, people go to jail. Like it is not okay to mess with people's money in that way.
It's a specialty that's regulated and very few other companies can do, right? I mean,
yeah, well, the first thing is anyone who's seen Ocean's 11, that's the way to start thinking about this. So Ocean's 11 was all about trying to rob the vault. Why was there so much money in the vault? Well, in casinos, the casino must have cash that represents every chip on the table. The casino makes money by you not walking out with fewer chips than you walked in, right? So, but they must have in the vault. The same thing applies. The government, when you have a virtual world and you're selling diamonds, great. You don't have to keep the money, you sell diamonds. But if you earned the diamonds and you can put them into a bank account, the government steps in and says, they're your diamonds. It's your money. You are not allowed to touch it. I am not allowed to touch it. In fact, even Tilia is not allowed to touch it. What you have to do is you have to put it in this very special bank account. It's called a sequestered account or a custodial account. And all the money in the world, virtual world, must be backed in that vault by law. That's the miss. So these companies that are doing it, if you can put money into the bank, the big miss is you will get a phone call from a regulator because New York, Texas, California, Florida, like they're on this. And because it can be dangerous. If you're a small startup and you take that money in and you spend it on an engineer and things kind of go sideways for a little bit, and then that money gets by a creator and the creator wants to take it out and you're like, hey, we don't have it, that is illegal, like legit.
And then can you distinguish a little too between like say tokens that we all hear about as well and then Linden dollars? Like they're, you've got a fixed price, right? And these tokens are fluctuating.
Right, so let's talk about how this works, right? And so the first option is why wouldn't you use fiat? So fiat is like the US dollar or the euro. So why wouldn't you use fiat? And we'll put that over here. And then over here, we'll talk about crypto. Because if you do use crypto, actually all this goes away, right? So if you use crypto and it trades on Coinbase and it moves in your world, but you can get your money out through exchanges, then you don't need money transmitter licenses. And we'll kind of get to that. So first, fiat. So fiat is clumsy and it's slow. In these virtual worlds, you need to be instantaneous. Someone buys a set of eyes, you can't wait for an ACH transfer to sell it, and you can't really use a credit card because credit cards have minimum fees and stuff like that. So I think everyone would agree that fiat is terrible. But there's a lot of talk about crypto, in case you haven't heard. A lot of talk about crypto and how crypto would work in these games. And that's very different. So crypto doesn't work, and there's a couple of reasons why. So the first reason is it can't support an economy in the way people think. So if you have an economy like a Second Life, and you make wings, and I have money, and I want to buy your wings, and the crypto is increasing in value 1% a day. That would be very normal for a crypto. You know, why would I spend it on wings? I don't need wings that badly, right? I like going up 1% a day. And if it's going down 1% a day, you're not going to accept it. And so the economy breaks down very fast if it fluctuates. That's the economic reason why crypto doesn't work. People think they can get around it. We haven't been able to see it. And Tilia is separated out, so we support other things. We haven't seen anybody truly work it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make money on crypto. We'll talk about NFTs later. But there's another set of reasons why crypto doesn't work, and you have to use what we call virtual coins. So Second Life does just Second Life, which people either thought was dead, or there's probably a lot of people in here who have never even heard of Second Life. Second Life does 1.6 million transactions a day, right? So if you compare that to, without talking badly about another company, if you compare that to a popular blockchain game that you can think of, or a metaverse game that you can think of, we've done more transactions than the top 2 or 3 during this fireside chat than they have done in 2022. Not crypto trades, that's different, but actual in-world transactions. So the number of transactions that you need to do is staggering. And even with all the talk about the layer 1, layer 2, all the new ways that you can do crypto, moving, you know, we're talking about billions of transactions a day. Second Life is a $650 million economy, 1.6 million transactions a day. That leads to the next problem. The speed at which you need these things to do is instantaneous. You cannot wait for anything. Now, I know there's some cryptos that are able to do that, but again, this is pretty complicated. But the real problem is the average transaction size. So in a virtual world, you don't buy a beer for $4. You buy a beer for 4 cents, right? In fact, we can move 1/250th of a dollar profitably, right? That is very, very hard to do on a blockchain or in crypto. So having done a lot of work on this, crypto doesn't really work. And I know that might be controversial, and a lot of people will have investments in these crypto games and have made a ton of money on currency, on crypto coins. But to power a virtual world, we cannot see in the 5 to 10 year time horizon how you're going to solve the economics and the things that are just systemic to crypto for a virtual world. You would have to literally build a treasury that would buy and sell to flatten out the fluctuation, which then, of course, then why would you do it? So that brings up what Linden is. Linden is a closed and open system simultaneously. It's open in the sense that you can put money in, you can move it, and you can take money out. So that's the open part, right? So that's similar to any currency and crypto and everything. But it's somewhat closed in the sense that Linden dollars only work in Second Life. While some may say, well, that's terrible, that's not distributed, that's not Web3, right? But what we've enabled is we've enabled a marketplace so that money can come in. So if you want to buy Linden dollars, you don't buy them from me. You buy them from a resident in Second Life. So there is a market. We step in to moderate that market. We are a treasury, but we don't we'll sell if there's too much buying pressure. We'll buy if there's too much selling pressure. That is incredibly rare. The market kind of takes care of itself. Again, if it happened on Coinbase, you've got a real problem on your hands. You're talking about, if you were Sandbox and the price was coming down, you'd have to spend $100 million to prop it back up to make that work. We let the market work its way out. And so that's why we do what we would call them a virtual token or a virtual coin, not a virtual currency. A virtual currency sort of by definition would be out there, and that's a very, very different need case.
But this is a metaverse opportunity, so how big is it?
Yeah, so I guess we're back to, how do you define the metaverse? And again, just, there's been so many people that have said these are the 7 things and these are the 8 things, and they're all probably right. We view certainly the metaverse as a bunch of technology. We think that interoperability is super important. But when we come back to money, and we think of if Second Life is $650 million, and if it's true, which it is, that that the economy is different than the money in. So Second Life doesn't bring in $650 million, right? Second Life generates $650 million of activity. Those are very different things. The money in, the money out, that's much less than $650 million. And the point of that is that if you think of the gaming world as $150 billion, roughly, it's bigger than that, but if you think about that, one way to look at the future is that all of these games are gonna be somehow loosely or very tightly associated with the concept of the metaverse. They're all gonna lean into creator economies. They're all gonna lean into building different things. Well, if you know, like if our revenue is 80 million and money that comes in is 160 million, I'm sharing, obviously data, but most people would keep that kind of quiet, but we're pretty open with stuff. But if you think of that, and you think of our economy as being somewhere between 4 and 8 times our revenue, and then you take the gaming market and say that's all going to go creator economy, you could see how these gaming worlds would be trillions of dollars, even if there's no growth. And it's a pretty safe assumption there's going to be a lot of growth. So when people throw out the number of 8 trillion and you recoil and you're like, that's impossible, it's actually very doable. You asked what the opportunity is. The opportunity is going to be multifaceted. Everyone's going to have a different opportunity. Different investments are going to do well. There's going to be Web 3 stuff, Web 2 stuff, Web 2.5. All that's going to happen. But for us, the opportunity is back to the casino example. If you've got $8 to $10 trillion out there that you have to back, that's a big financial opportunity. If you can make a very tiny amount of money every time something moves, that's a big financial opportunity. And right now we're lucky enough that we partnered with JP Morgan, which they can move an awful lot of money, and they can store an awful lot of money. And that's why they invested in us. It was really the partnership, and the investment actually came later. If you think about that and you think about from our perspective, and then we've lucked into, we may not be the only company that can do it. We're the only company that is doing it. So a company like PayPal could step in. They have the same licenses, but they would then have to issue tokens, and they would have to do transactions that are 12 cents. And PayPal's not in the business of moving 12 cents at a time. So yeah.
To catch up some, what are you enabling in terms of virtual economies in games by going across more platforms, like by being outside of a Second Life now?
Right, so if you could convert your Linden dollar into, and buy a Fortnite sword, that would be super interesting, right? that's also a very long time in the future, right? So, but if you could do that, the question is how, right? You're going to need a set of financial rails that we actually don't have right now. We have a concept of ACH. We have this new thing, relatively new, global, throughout global history of crypto. But moving money instantaneously between even the nation states that we have right now, like even moving money from the United States to Canada, like is a more arduous process than it should be. The metaverse is not a replacement for the real world. It's not just going to be completely different in some ways, but the instantaneous nature of needing to move stuff and money, that is going to be at a level that we haven't seen before. Like the Visa network is incredible. We can talk about how that's going to impact the metaverse. But that opportunity to take a dollar of one semi-open, semi-closed system, which we think is the future, a virtual coin, and use that in a different virtual world. You're talking about universal wallets or things like that. That's a future that is super exciting and an enormous opportunity.
And do you need an interoperable metaverse to maximize the opportunity here? And then how are you going to help make that happen, I guess?
I'm not so sure you need an interoperable metaverse for things to happen. It certainly is going to make it a lot better. So you could have we think of the future as similar to like nation states. So, and sort of satellite economies. So there will be, in our opinion, first for a second, let's ignore the full interoperability of the metaverse. There will be large virtual worlds or siloed metaverses that you can think of as a nation state. So they have their own governments, their own sense of space, their own passports, and their own money. And then there will be smaller satellite states around them that might use those rails. They might use the same currency. They might use the same money movement techniques. They might have the same or similar passport. Or they might just be adjacent. That could stay on its own and not be interoperable. There may be 1,000 of those, there may be 20. Facebook might be one, and Google might end up being one, and Second Life might be one. Epic certainly is going to be one. EA is going to be one. Now you talk about how are they going to exchange each other. Well, it gets extremely complicated extremely quickly. So if you have a money system in EA, and you have a money system at Epic, the concept that you could easily go between the two of those is somewhat false. If in one world a sword is worth 10 wings, and in another world wings are worth 10 swords, there's no crossing mechanism. It's not like a perfect market where it's going to end up at 5 for 5. They're just different. And so there will need to be some sort of mechanism where this nation state goes into this thing that goes into this nation state. That thing might be a crypto. That's where this starts to change. I don't see a world where the nation states can operate on crypto, but the thing that goes back and forth, it'll be most likely a stable coin, because it's going to be very difficult to do that fiat. And it'll have to be something that is absolutely backed by fiat. You will not be able to get around that, because the minute one of the entire ecosystem of every nation state, the minute one can turn that money into fiat, the law, the current law, will come in and say the entire ecosystem must be backed. So it'll have to be backed by fiat, and but it'll have to move instantaneously at very low dollar volumes, with very low friction, no gas fees. So it's complicated, but that's sort of the 10-year out vision.
So right now, like, what partners do you have then?
So we have partners and we have customers. So our customer list in various stages. So this is pretty recent that we spun this out. So like we partner with AWS, we partner with Unity, obviously we partner with JP Morgan. we have a partnership with PayPal. They don't know it, right? They're so big, but like we work with them and Coinbase and stuff like that. But those are low-level partnerships. Like 92% of games in the world have some portion of their system on AWS. And by the way, AWS is like an outstanding company to partner with.
Yeah. More on the customer side than what's happening there.
So, so Upland, for example, which by the way is a crypto game, right? Which moves land as NFTs. They're a customer of ours. We drive their, if you will, their stable coin, their virtual coin that money comes in and money comes out. They were very astute. Of course, they liked us, so that's why I call them astute. But they were very astute in the sense that they were able to do both. They had NFTs and crypto, and they had securely backed coin, and they have actually grown when you see some of their competitors, like a Decentraland, who have actually declined, right? And so, because they did it the other way. Certainly we wish we were supporting Decentraland as a huge company, and we want everyone to do well. So that's a perfect example of a customer. As other companies, very large aggregators of mobile apps, they are thinking about being a nation state. There are companies that have 1,000 mobile apps, and they want to have a single token that will go between all of them, and they are going to figure out games of skill and games where they just sell diamonds, and as they see that economy grow, they've chosen Tilia. We'd kind of like to keep them secret. I don't want to keep them secret, but we kind of like them keep them secret so that we can announce them when they're ready to launch instead of when we sign the contract, so that we can get some press. But in general, outside of Meta or Horizon, we are in some level of discussion. Either we've signed the contract, we're about to sign the contract, or sign the contract and about to launch, with kind of everybody who's not a crypto game. If you're a blockchain game, we only have one or two.
And then are other countries beyond the U.S. sort of getting their act together on things like metaverse payments?
Yeah. So another thing that's heading towards people that they may not see, just like the EU sort of led in privacy, they actually are quite strict on what you're allowed to do in terms of, as you would expect, in terms of what you do with money. And they're quite advanced in so many ways, because the Euro and the EU, they have a lot of experience with the concept of nation states, and their laws are more recent. So a lot of what's happening, especially in the US, is it's so freaking confusing, and people kind of abused it, right? So we came up with this thing called crypto, and then people did anything they wanted, and everybody made a bunch of money, and they left the government behind. Governments don't like being left behind, so they're going to come in and they're going to regulate it, and they're going to either put it in it doesn't matter whether they're going to put it in the SEC or whatever. Regulation is coming, but it's going to be old regulation with like 3 words tweaked applied to this brand new thing. That is going to be quite a disaster. Europe was much further, was much later when they started creating all these money laws. So their laws will apply better, and since they do, they're doing it faster. So the EU, the UK, Australia, Japan, South Korea, they're actually ahead of the US, but in a good way. The US is going to catch up, hopefully in a good way, but I'm not overly optimistic. The good news for us as a company is we have Congress on our side. The more inept Congress is, the more you need what we provide. And so Congress is our moat against competition and stuff like that, so that's not a bad thing.
And so what's the roadmap? Like, where do you want this to go? Like, who's going to help you get there?
The residents of these virtual worlds, right? It's not going to, we are just an enabler, right? So JR at Roblox is fond of saying they're the picks and axes. We all know what that means. and there's going to be people mining the gold. We kind of look at ourselves and say, the whole reason that you need the picks and axes is to mine gold. Once you get the gold, you got to move it somewhere. We move the gold. So we want everyone to be successful. The more success out there, the better we do, and the better the world does. We have a huge opportunity that this metaverse thing could be really good for the world. We have an equal opportunity that it could be bad for the world. And so we would like to see a good, massive virtual world metaverse interactivity, and then we just want to be part of that.
And I guess the regulators are sort of the thing that make you one of the more unique companies, and like not everybody's going to get past them.
Right. The regulators are real. And they're not the most forward thinking because that's not their job. Their job is not to think ahead and to make things easy. Their job is actually to make sure that consumers are protected. Regulation is good. So you partner with JP Morgan, they know regulators. We've been doing it for 7 years. We know the regulators. And when we hear people say, well, we're going to get our money transmitter licenses too, I want to have a PDF packet that has every state, who the transmitter license person is, their email, their phone. It takes years and tens of millions of dollars just to get them, and then tens of millions of dollars to keep them. So it's not so much that people can't do it, it's that there's no game on the planet, even Meta backed out of it. There's nobody on the planet that should do this on their own rather than use us. And so, yeah, so that's what we like about regulation.
All right. Well, thank you, Fred.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Let's go.
Oh, that way?
That's right. All right, thank you, Brad and Dean. All right, next up, we have the founders of cutting-edge AR-enabled gaming companies to discuss the current state and future possibilities of augmented gaming. It's an area that I absolutely love and can't wait to hear what they have to say. So please welcome to the stage Alex Liu, the Chief Creative of Animal Repair Shop, Jerry Ellsworth, the CEO of Tilt5, and Amy Lemire, the Managing Partner at WXR Fund.
Nice to see you guys today, and thank you for coming to the one and only AR panel at GamesBeat. So we're focusing on augmented reality, and we'll talk about the definition of AR actually in a little bit. But pleasure to have Alex and Jerry here. Jerry and I have known each other for years, and Alex and I met last night, but it feels like for years. I'm going to turn it over to each of you guys to introduce yourselves. So Jerry, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thank you. This is great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Jerry. I'm the CEO and founder of Tilt5. We're a platform, mixed reality glasses, super lightweight glasses that, yay, yeah, someone cheered. So basically its main focus is on tabletop gaming, so video games and tabletop games that you can reach in and interact. This magical world spills out in front of you. We have a magic wand that lets you interact with the game characters. You can reach in and touch things with your hands. We work with third-party developers to bring a ton of games in the board game space, pure video game space, and we're just starting to publish our first games now. So we just announced Settlers of Catan, which is really exciting. It's a fun one.
Well, that's a lot to follow up. I'm Alex Liu. I'm the Chief Creative Officer for a company called Animal Repair Shop. Some people know us from a company called 42 Entertainment. We originally started creating games in sort of the real world. That was blending technology and digital, called alternate reality games.
The other AR.
The other AR. And the idea was to take stories and break them into all of this evidence as if though it really happened, and then distribute it out in the real world for players to find it, piece it together, almost sort of an archaeologist's like dig of information to bring these stories back together as they happen. So we worked on big things like Microsoft's I Love Bees campaign, if you guys heard of that. We did a huge thing for the Nolans for Batman. A combination of live events, websites, secret things, physical objects. And so now we've funded a company, we've started a company called animal repair shop. And we are putting out a product. This is available in the next couple of weeks. This giant, heavy 10-pound box here.
Yeah.
That is
You're seeing it here first.
Essentially, yeah, you guys are seeing it here first. Essentially, a AR adventure that explodes onto your desk or your table at home, right? And so we took this idea of millions of players piecing together stories all around the world and said, hey, what if we took all of the learning, all of the storytelling, and all of the dynamic of what works there and bring it to your mobile devices, put it in a box, fill this adventure where you don't, so think of it almost as like a 6 to 10 hour escape room in chapters that's very story driven, that involves you, and it literally comes to life on your table in AR, right? And so that's what we're up to.
Yeah, I love both of these, and they're similar and different. Both can be multiplayer or single player, is that right? And then yours is like more of a physical thing that then you use a phone to augment the reality.
Which for a lot of people, they ask the question, especially in environments like this, of, you know, why the physical if we're in digital world, right? And so that is something that's unique.
And super interesting. We explored it a little bit yesterday. And then, Jerry, yours is, because I own it, I was one of the Kickstarter people, you roll out a mat, and then you're using the glasses with a wand to interact with mostly digital interaction.
Yeah, although we are moving into more of a physical blended experience, it's coming soon. So
can you
maybe
say more?
We should do a deal.
Yeah, we should talk, definitely.
Well, I love the concept of being just more than virtual, more than digital. I think that's really interesting, and I think we'll see more of that as, you know, Apple and others start to come out with their versions of smart glasses. How do you see the future shifting as smart glasses become more prevalent, you know, over the next, we hope, you know, 5 years or whatever?
Well, I'm excited about it. You know, all of us are working with the same kind of laws of physics, which is kind of making it a slow process. You know, there's a lot of rumor mill out there about, you know, Apple's going to release something. I hope they do soon, because our product's kind of in a different space than they'll likely go into. But as there's more awareness, as we can start to change users' behaviors, as they start to adopt this type of interaction, and then that'll open up a lot of opportunities for people to develop content for it, you know, and have a real utility out there for the average user. I think it takes a little bit of time. You know, there's really a lot of engineering that has to be done to be as polished as an Apple iPhone today. But, you know, remember your original iPhone, it was a little primitive.
Yes, I remember it all. What do you think?
I think it's such a hard question, because AR, at least for us that are working in it every day and are steeped in it, we've seen it and we've been playing with it for so long, right? And so just at a show of hands, how many people have actually used a HoloLens or a Magic Leap headset or anything like that?
Oh,
okay, so
good.
Quite a few people. All right, so
Yeah.
my answer comes down to this, is that I'm looking for the promise, the full promise of AR, right? So the first time I really sat down and was at the Magic Leap office and got to see what they were talking about in their development, it was that moment where it was a game changer. Like, it was a switch in my head, and it was like, oh, this will revolutionize the way that we look at things, right? At some point, there'll be a generation who will think it is so primitive and crazy that we actually have screens, right? And I know that sounds so, you know, lofty, but it's very true, because being in technology for so long and seeing that, you go, okay, I can see this. I can immediately see, you know, a billion possibilities explode in front of us. But like you said, I think the thing that's held us back is the technology, right? Is, you know, all of the physics that are around that. And also, to be truthful, a lot of really bad experiences. There's been a lot of terrible AR experiences. I'm sorry, but, you know, I think we're trying to figure out how to overcome that hurdle.
I think you're touching on something interesting too. So as I've been in the space for about a decade now, and there were a lot of lofty companies that came out. You mentioned Magic Leap. They went out, it sounded like they wanted to boil their ocean with their first product, and it under-delivered on the promise. I think going forward, more narrow, nichier experiences that provide value, interactions, or utility for users are going to gain traction first. And then, someday down the future, we're going to see like glasses that do everything, or some other technology. Who knows? It may not be glasses.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I put your glasses on, it was the version before this one, because we've known each other back that long. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. These are one of the first set of comfortable glasses that you're making at a price point that's reasonable. But to your point, they're very focused on doing the one thing, and that was refreshing. It was good to see. I'd like to step back a little bit and talk about why, as you were creating what you're creating, did you mix that augmented reality with gaming? Like, what was it about augmented reality that you thought, oh, this is going to take it to the next level, even though there are all these challenges with it?
So I think that from our beginnings, and that's why I kind of gave a little bit of that preamble, of essentially we were creating games and story experiences that we like to say use the world as a game board, right? And so we were sending people out to geolocations to pick up cakes that the Joker had left at bakeries that had phones hidden in them, and that people had to call and unlock websites and do all these things. And it was really exciting in the physical world, right? And connecting to digital, millions of people working together like that. And so it was amazing and it was really fun, but that touch point, the actual touch point of getting that cake, right, could only be a few dozen people, even if you're doing it all around the world, right? So when we were looking at AR and what it can do, how it can be location-based, how it can be physical, how it really blends the idea of the real world and gameplay, in a sense, we were already doing that. We were already putting a layer of gaming and story on the world. And so AR was the natural, it basically made it possible that at some point, right, instead of going somewhere to maybe get a phone call from the Joker, you can be sitting at your kitchen table and the Joker can walk in and sit down. You can have a conversation with them, right? And so that's really what got us excited. And so the idea of taking story and really immersing people in that world, that's how we approached it.
I like it. On my side, it starts back to when Gabe Newell hired me at Valve Software. He hired me, he says, put together this hardware R&D department, and this is your mission. There's problems in the gaming space. There's gamers, non-gamers, hardcore gamers, people that used to play games that stopped playing games, and they don't really intermingle much. Go out and figure out how to bring the whole family together and get them to game. And I was like, wow, coming from the toy industry prior to that, I'm like, yes, this is like a very noble mission, and I really bought into it. And so the first time at Valve, we prototyped through spending millions of dollars and having military-grade AR systems, and I got to see how people interacted, and you had that intimate connection with people across the table from you. I'm like, this is it. It's going to improve people's lives. People are going to be more connected to each other. It's going to be more immersive, and it's just in general going to be more fun. Plus, it bridges the gaps between all of these pools of potential game players and gets them playing together.
I like that. The other thing I really think is interesting about AR, and particularly as you're talking about your shift from more physical world to a desktop version, is accessibility, right? And and not only having different types of gamers work together, but just having it be available to more types of people in general. Wondering, just to talk about, do you guys think about that as you're developing your games? Just curious how you guys look at accessibility as you're developing and creating.
Yeah, accessibility is tricky. Especially when you're trying to put like a headset on someone, that may have hearing issues, maybe vision issues or mobility issues. For us as a small startup, we think about it a lot. We can't necessarily act on it as much because we're small.
Yeah.
But, as we went through designing our product, like our magic wand looks like a barbecue lighter. And, our industrial designers hated the look of it. They're like, we don't want it to look like a barbecue lighter. And so they did hundreds of different iterations on it. We kept coming back to that because it was accessible. So someone like my father, who's never really played a game before, we put the magic wand barbecue lighter in his hand and say, like, it's like a hot glue gun or a barbecue lighter. Just pull the trigger and just pick that character up. they can do it. So it makes it accessible to, a broad audience by making those kind of concessions as much as we didn't want it.
Yeah, accessibility is a very tricky issue. I think where we have this conversation a lot, and we really think about it in terms of content specific to different audiences, right? And so, to be honest, where we're really at right now is that we went into a very deep dive, as you always do, on accessibility features for your product, and it's definitely top of mind. One of the things that we came across, and it sort of dovetails on your question of why physical, is that outside of the people in this room, right? Outside of people who are working with AR, the general consumer really has no idea what AR is. And we talked about this a little bit last night. So, what people know as AR, and if they even understand that it's AR, is Pokemon Go,
yeah.
right? And even that from a developer side and our side, like not knocking it because it's cool and so pervasive and all of those things, right? But it's so limited in what it can do, and that's sort of the beauty of it. But the average consumer has no idea. And so when we were talking last night of like, why make the digital, why make the physical pieces, is that it is what we like to call true mixed reality, right? So if the promise is that, eventually we're gonna sit on this stage and we can all look through our glasses or our new fabricated eyes that we just popped in, and we're all sitting together in this cave and we're having this experience and all these different things, like, we all understand what that future looks like, however, for the average family of 4, right? When you start digging through the Arkham files, case files of a villain who's been locked away, and as a family you solve a puzzle together, and then you find an ink blot and you put your phone and it launches a 30-second full motion animation, and as you're moving it, you can see it. We've all seen that, but it still blows people away. And quite honestly, the physicality of it still blows me away. Right? And so I can show you, and here's a really interesting thing, like I can show you videos of this, right? And you'll go, oh, I get it. But if I show you the exact same video, and I've done this with multiple people, and then lay out the Gotham City board on the table, build out the Gotham City network news building, and you scan it like it's Times Square, and it comes to life, and you're watching through your phone on the physical building the live newscast in Gotham City, right? It feels amazing. And we're not doing anything that we didn't see in AR 10 years ago, right, when we first started seeing it. Yeah. So there's something about bridging that gap that really gets people in the mindset of something that's really incredible. And so what we started doing, I think ultimately over time, we'll have less physical goods. It is a real pain in the ass to deal with cogs and to make things and to ship them when we can all live in a digital world. Yeah. But right now, when we're talking about augmented reality, and even you talking about having a mat and having a wand, there's a physicality that makes that connection, right? Versus going like, oh yeah, it's easy, it's like VR. Which we all know isn't easy.
That's a great point. Yeah. Just having anchors in the real world that are relatable helps change users' behavior, right? Yeah. When you look at the evolution of a lot of products, there was like some kind of predecessor that was an anchor, telephones or, computers even, the typewriter leading into computers. It's just something familiar that helps bridge that gap, getting people into it and comfortable.
Yeah, the other interesting thing, you mentioned VR. If there's a family of 4 doing VR together, right, how does that work? And, we've seen games that do it, but like, is everybody wearing a headset? Is one person wearing a headset? Are some people wearing screens? And lots of people looking at how that goes. But with a game like yours, everyone is looking at each other. They're just looking through a mobile screen to actually interact with the game, which is again more comfortable and more used to how people are playing a game. So that transition from physical to integrating the digital. We talked about what Alex has been blown away by. I would love to hear what blows you away about Tilt 5, or what you've seen somebody else been blown away by, right? Like that moment.
Well, I love going to trade shows and seeing a broad spectrum of people come up and giving the demos. And a lot of times, we'll have like a young kids, they lose their mind. They're climbing on the table, they're running around, and they're just giddy. That's really joyous for me. And also what's really joyous is you have people walk up and like, hey, I'm not a gamer. You know, I don't know what, if I'm going to be good at this. I'm like, no, get in here, try it. And seeing them have that kind of success, that's been really amazing. And maybe the third thing that blows my mind is now that we're shipping these units in quite a big volume, developers have been picking our system up and taking it outside the gaming space. So there's a group training astronauts with our system. There's people working on Factory of the Future with it. There's a group out of Texas that's helping kids with cancer, have play, and I don't know all the details. It's just like, these are coming in on a daily basis. I'm like, oh wow, it's like extending beyond what we even imagined.
And what is the most popular game on your system right now?
We have an action shooter, Battle Planet, that's super popular. When we're out doing trade shows, we have some little vignettes. There's a Lego demo where you can build collaboratively with multiple people around the table. Super, super popular.
What do you think is the biggest blocker for traction for both of your games? Right, obviously, you're pre-launch and you've recently launched, but what do you think is the challenge for getting people to adopt and buy and use them?
Well, I think awareness for us. We're such a small startup. We don't have billions of dollars to dump into this. One of our advisors back calculated what our yearly burn rate is 30 minutes of what Facebook is putting into their metaverse product.
That's an interesting
I'm like, man,
statistic.
if I could just have 1 hour of their burn rates, imagine what I could do with marketing. And
right.
I think we're on the same place there. I think that we're smaller companies who are trying to forge a new path with this, right? But I think outside of just the nuts and bolts sort of marketing and promotion money of it, I really think it comes down, what we're talking about is the public's awareness of AR and actually understanding what it is. And I mentioned earlier there's a lot of bad AR experiences, and that sort of happens, we see in every sort of new technology, right? You tend to see things that are like, oh, this is cool, how can we make it, how can we use it for marketing? Because there's money in marketing. How can we use it as a gimmick? And so we've all scanned a Pepsi can and played a bad racing car game that doesn't give us any utility or value and isn't better than the mobile game that we can have on our phones. So people's perceptions of AR is either nothing or it's really bad and it's really gimmicky, right? And it's not fun. And so I think, it's that thing where people haven't played, it's not pervasive enough. And so hopefully, there'll be different developers and companies, and like you said, Apple, other people pushing AR and showing creative experiences that are actually valuable and fun that people can do. That's gonna move the needle because, someone sitting down and playing with your technology, I'm sure you're finding this too, or playing with our box for a half an hour, is sold. Right? It's almost like we have to be old school traveling salesman, like, the World Book of Encyclopedia, going like, hey, you guys want to play a game tonight, right?
Door to door.
But it really is that, because they're not used to playing in this space.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, whenever we do an event and we see immediate spike in sales. We have a new piece of technology that lets you stream out to, Twitch and YouTube, your experience. We're seeing like spikes in sales. So, I think for us, it's going to be like getting it on people's faces, letting them play it, and getting them out on social media, streaming their experience is going to be big pulls for us in the near term.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. The other thing I was thinking about is just in terms of technology shifts within the past 3 years, and then maybe looking out the next 3 years. Are you seeing a significant change? Are things changing as quickly as you would like them to from a technology perspective? I mean, Jerry, you're building your own glasses, which is amazingly impressive. I'm interested to see how quickly you think, the technology that you aren't controlling, 5G, whatever, processor speeds, right? What would you want in the future? Wish list.
The glasses are just incidental to what we're selling. We're selling holograms on the table, right? So there are technologies out there that you could imagine in the next 15 years where you don't even need to wear glasses. You just generate a light field that just pops out of the table or out of a screen. You have multiple people sitting around and it does exactly what our glasses are doing. It's just so far off right now. Like in universities, they're sampling these screens and they're like smaller than a postage stamp.
Tiny,
But,
yeah.
As far as connectivity, yeah, of course, like higher throughput of like 5G, 6G, whatever comes is going to be great and useful. Like I mentioned earlier, we're struggling with the laws of physics. I was joking with someone recently, it's an optics expert. I was like, we need to have our own Moore's law for augmented reality, because Moore's law is about chips doubling. Right. Optics doesn't double every year. So for the last 8 years, 9 years of AR, we've kind of seen the same thing with very small incremental improvements.
Optics, Moore's law, nice.
Yeah.
I feel, when I'm looking at sort of the future of AR, I feel that the content generation and the experience building hasn't caught up to what is possible today.
Oh.
So, and that might be because I come from less of a technology side of it and more from a creative storytelling side of it and experience side of it. So, I was part of the group that founded Disney Online. Our CEO, who can be here today, Susan Bonds, was the creative lead for the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, if you've been there, Mission Space. So this idea of merging physical and digital has always been part of our DNA. I think one of the things that we look at is that we're talking about technology, but right now, there are 2 billion devices in the world that people are walking around with, with Android and iPhone that have the most robust AR capabilities, in the world right now, right? And it's there for developers to use. And we're not taking advantage of that. Now, does it have its problems? Sure. And ultimately, are we talking about glasses or screens where we don't need any glasses? Yes, but for right now, there's just this huge open gash of a market where we have the most powerful devices we ever have had walking around with us, right, that enables all this, but there's really not great content. And
I think you're hitting on something interesting. Like, I feel like AR, there hasn't been like a big commitment to do those super high-end AAA kind of experiences. Like, it seems like over the last decade of AR, we've been kind of stuck in indie, development land, which sometimes great things emerge out of that. Like, your stuff's amazing. It's gonna, but, someday someone's going to commit.
We're still referring to Pokemon Go, and that came out many, many years ago.
2016.
Yeah, and that's
Can you
very
imagine
AR
that? 2016.
So, yeah, I agree. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Susan, your CEO, because it's great to hear both of your companies have a female CEO, and as WXR Fund, we invest in AR, VR, and AI companies with female founders. So I'm glad to see that. More women in gaming it's just shout out to you guys for that. We need to wrap up. We have 2 minutes, and I'm sorry that we don't have any time for questions, but definitely recommend, if you guys see these folks out in the audience in the conference center, to connect with them and try and get a demo, because both of them are really fascinating and really interesting experiences. As we close out, just a few words that you want to share with the audience about AR and gaming.
So being around here in the last couple of days is really interesting that we are the only AR panel.
It's true. It's true.
And it's been really fun seeing all the different speakers and really this idea of user gen resurfacing again and being such a big topic that everybody's talking about. Yeah. And of course, AI again resurfacing in such a serious way. And I don't see any of these things as mutually exclusive, right? And so to me, like glasses or screens or whatever it is, it's just the output, right? Ultimately, we need to either build fun or utility or both, right? And so that's what we're all doing. Yeah, right? And so, as we're developing, and of course we all know about, hey, let's make sure that we're looking at our audiences and let's talk about accessibility and all these things. But don't forget that we are here to either make things that are useful or things that are really fun and entertaining, or both, right? Yeah. And that should be the core. Like getting obsessed about the specific technology has its place, but that's sort of our mission.
I love it. How can I top that? Ditto, ditto 2 times. Yeah, I think that's true. I'm excited about, all the new technologies with AI, how that's going to apply to our field, and it's super exciting, and I'm excited to see what the people pioneering in these different spaces get out there, play, find these game mechanics that really work.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being here and building things that are fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, everybody. This way.
All right, so thank you, Alex, Jerry, and Amy, for that great discussion. Next, we will hear from Alan Evans, the CEO and co-founder of Freeverse, on the possibility for games to continue building revenue over time. Welcome to the stage, Alan.
Hi, everyone. So they say that a good way to start a talk is to do so with a question. So this is my question to you fine people here this morning. Which one person in the games industry has had the most influence? So which is the person you think in the history of our industry who's had the most influence on the industry? Think about it. Still thinking. Give you some inspiration. Maybe from yesterday you're inspired, you think it's Will Wright. Maybe you look more towards the East and you might think it's Hideo Kojima. Or maybe you're a tech nerd, a bit like me, and you think it's John Carmack. So how many people in the room thought of this guy, Chris Anderson? Not a single hand. How many people have heard of Chris Anderson? 1, 2, 3, a few hands, a few hands. So Chris Anderson originally was the bassist of a group called REM. And you might be thinking, hang on a minute, REM's bassist is Mike Mills, it's not Chris Anderson. There were, in fact, 2 REMs that came out of Georgia several decades ago. And in true Highlander fashion, there can be only one. So they had a battle of the bands to decide who was going to have the permission to use the name REM going forwards. And unfortunately for our hero here, Chris Anderson, his punk band REM lost the battle of the bands, and the other REM went on to global domination. So poor Chris decided to cut his losses, gave up on his dreams of becoming a punk musician, and turned his attention to his other main interest in his life, which was, among other things, economics. And the punk industry's loss is actually the games industry's gain, because Chris's thoughts have enabled us to generate and monetize games in a completely different way. What Chris was interested in, seen through the lens of the games industry, was this problem, right? Making games is an expensive business. And so as a result, there's always a pressure for games to be profitable. And so the impact of that problem is that when you're launching a game, at least 30 years ago, 20 years ago, there's this stress always pre-launch. You've got to make your money back as soon as possible. You have that limited window after launching a game to make money. And the root cause of that problem, according to Chris Anderson, is that the main time you're going to make money with that game is in that post-launch period. So what Chris did was do a lot of research and do a lot of work on this concept of the long tail. Right? He wrote a couple of books about it. He wrote a couple of articles about it. He popularized the idea, and he went on to become editor of Wired magazine. And the long tail, as you can imagine, has had quite, as you can see, has had quite a big success in the games industry. So no longer are we having to monetize in that very first period post-launch, but we have an entire period of time after that which we can monetize. And that's led to the free-to-play movement, right? So now free-to-play games, yes, of course, they make money in that initial period of time, but they also have the opportunity to monetize over a long period of time afterwards. And so that's given rise to microtransactions, advertising, subscription models, and so on and so forth. Great. But the long tail, like all good solutions, leads to another problem. And that problem is that naturally, people start to lose interest. Yeah? All of us here have played games. We don't play the same games that we played 20 years ago. We lose interest over time. And the impact of that through the long tail model is that naturally, the tail gets smaller and smaller and smaller over time. And if the game hasn't been successful, it's just going to get worse. So the root cause of that is that the game itself lacks the mechanics and the methods to successfully monetize that long tail. So if we understand the long tail, what we realize is that while it reduces the pressure on a game to monetize in that post-launch window, what it does, it moves that pressure to monetize during the long tail. And it does so through the pressure on retention. So as we all know, retention is one of the key KPIs in many games, not only free-to-play games now, but many other games that are monetizing through the long tail, whether it's with DLC or in-app purchases or subscriptions, skins, things like that. So retention becomes one of the key figures that we look at when we're trying to monetize that long tail. And so modern games are very good at driving that retention, right? And we don't need to look very far. Fortnite's a great example of, mechanics that are put in place to drive retention over a long time. I've split them into kind of like hard mechanics and softer mechanics at the bottom here. Obviously you need to make a great game, right? You can't retain players if your game sucks, so you need to have a great game. You can add multiplayer components, whether it's competitive or co-op, ways for games to engage other players and, again, drive retention. Of course, successful retention mechanics involve live ops or updates, DLC. I was surprised to see that World of Warcraft is still churning out new updates, which brought me back to my days when I was playing it many, many years ago. But beyond these core mechanics, there are what I would call soft retention mechanics as well, right? So we can reward players for what they do in the game, yeah? So we have trophies and achievements and trading cards and collectibles. We've talked a lot during this event about UGC, right? User-generated content. It's clearly a good way giving the gamers the agency, empowering them to create their own content within their games and create their own experience. And of course, you need to build a community. And what I want to talk about today is how Web3 can impact particularly these retention mechanics. How we can use Web3 technology to increase that retention. And I want to move the conversation about Web3 and NFTs away from where it's been so far and into actually what problems can it solve within the industry. So when we talk about Web3, we can look back at the history of where the term comes from. So Web 1 was all about reading, consuming passively. Web 2 was all about writing, contributing. And what people say Web 3 is about ownership, right? What does that really mean, ownership? What it means is that we have the possibility now, as we've seen in various really interesting talks and panels over the last day and a half, of gamers to actually own their content and therefore extract that value out of the game economy for the first time. And we've seen examples of that with what we might call blockchain games. And the problem I have with blockchain games so far is that they're really only using one core mechanic here. which is that of collection and speculation. Yeah? Speculation as to the rarity of the tokens that you can own. And if you think about it, when you're in an economy whereby the value of what you own can only go up according to speculation as to its rarity, then the economy is always going to be driven by the number of people inside it. It needs to have this constant flux of new users coming in who want to buy the tokens that other users have already purchased. Otherwise, when that influx of new users disappears, then the value of those tokens goes down. And this is a graph from Axie Infinity. I could have taken it from any blockchain game, which eventually, when it's based on speculation, it's kind of inevitable because there is not an infinite supply of new users coming in at the bottom of the pyramids. So the Web3 problem is slightly different. The Web3 problem is that games based purely on speculation tend towards boom and bust, right? We've seen the evidence of that, but you don't even need to see the evidence to think that it makes sense. There is never going to be this permanent influx of more and more new users that will drive the economy. So we have the same problem as before. And so the impact of that is, why bother with Web3? What problem is it really solving here? And the root cause of it, in my opinion, is that the non-fungible tokens, the NFTs that represent these items in the games, are these static, immutable items. They can only be used as collectibles. And if they can only be used as collectibles, then the mechanic of artificial scarcity is always going to be based on speculation, which is not sustainable, as we've seen. So, what if Web3 technology could be used to generate earned value? Beyond speculative value, what if we could use Web3 mechanics to actually solve problems in the games industry and generate earned value for gamers and for game developers? Let's think of some examples based on the three mechanics that we mentioned earlier on. The first is rewarding players, right? Right now, with NFTs, you might get given them, they stay the same forever, they're collectibles. Good for you. Congratulations. What if that NFT could change and evolve based on what the gamer does with it? So let's take the example here. It's not a football player, it's a soccer player. I have to correct my English for the audience here. A soccer player who starts off as a 3-star player in a soccer management game. If the user goes back and trains that player and upgrades their stats and turns that player from a 3-star player to a 6-star player, then they have generated value. They have earned the value of that token. So if they sell it for a profit, it's based on what they did, on their activities, on their actions, not just on how rare or scarce that token was. It can go the other way as well. Now, I'm sure many of you remember the Tamagotchi. What an amazing retention mechanic the Tamagotchis had, right? Unless you go back and feed and medicate and look after your digital pet multiple times a day, it will die. You can apply that same mechanic to in-game tokens as well, if they can evolve and change. Think of, again, the soccer player who you do not train. You leave him to go to seed, or her. And so by not going back and training him, that soccer player gets fatter, less fit, scores fewer goals, is less useful. That's a good retention mechanic because you're driving players to come back to maintain the value of their assets for themselves in the game, but also for themselves out of the game as well. So you have this ability not only to reward players for what they're doing in the game, but also incentivize them to keep coming back so they don't lose the value of what they have. If we look at this example, if we look at this phenomenon in a real-world example, this is a soccer management game that was soft launched on FreeVerse's platform. It's called Goal Revolution. As you might expect, after launch, with zero marketing spend, pretty much, and zero advertising, no user acquisition, there was a steady increase in users. And as you might expect, with no user acquisition, after a while, people get bored of every game, the users go down. But look what happens around about day 30, 35. Suddenly, that downward curve flattens off. Suddenly, users are incentivized to stay in the game because what they're doing is affecting the value of the tokens they have in the game. This is a very different graph to some of the most of the blockchain boom and bust games that we've seen so far. And the success of this graph meant that this game has gone from being soft launch and is now being signed to a worldwide football IP and will be launched worldwide next year. At this conference, we've talked a lot about user-generated content, right? It's key that allowing gamers the permission to customize their experience is very, very important for the engagement of the gamer within the game. I am a very proud Welshman. When I buy a car in a racing game, maybe I want to paint the best flag in the world, the Welsh Dragon. If you haven't seen the Welsh Dragon, go and look at it. It is definitely the coolest flag in the world, right? Now, a fellow Welshman might pay me good money for the effort that I have put into painting a Welsh Dragon on the side of this car. An Englishman, maybe less, right? The fact is that I have customized my content. Maybe I've even paid money to the game developer to buy the raw ingredients, the raw materials to create my user-generated content. Then I should be able to sell it on a secondary market. And if I do so, not only am I being retained in the game ecosystem, but the game developer can charge a commission on that sale. So not only is Web3 technology here permitting driving retention, but it's also increasing monetization directly by allowing commissions on these secondhand trades. And it's also being slightly fairer to the gamer. If I've created something, why shouldn't I be able to monetize it? Furthermore, if the token here can evolve and change every single time, then the person who buys it from me can customize it even further. They can put different alloys on the car, or different color leather seats, or they can upgrade the engine so the car is more powerful and more useful in the game. Again, going back to that first mechanic. Finally, I want to talk about the mixture of the Web 2 and the Web 3 worlds. At another VentureBeat event here in San Francisco 3 or 4 weeks ago called MetaBeat, at Freeverse, we launched an NFT, the MetaBeat NFT, which is free. It was literally free. All the attendees of the conference could sign up and get their NFT for free. It's literally worthless. It's free. You could sign up for an infinite amount of them if you had an infinite number of emails. So what you did was, with the NFT, is that when you retweeted certain hashtags associated with the conference, the level of this NFT evolved. It went up to level 2. When you convinced someone to like one of your tweets, the level went to level 3. And then when you went downstairs to the front booth and showed your level 3 NFT, you got a free MetaBeat sticker or pin or pen or something, I can't remember. The point was that you were getting rewards based on your engagement in social media. This is something we see in Freeverse in the other half of our company, which is targeting more brands, that brands are engaging with their users in social media and rewarding them for that engagement in the Web3 world with tokens that can be upgraded and can unlock rewards, features, prizes, etc., whether they are virtual or real. So here, finally, we have 3 problems that Web3 actually solves. Beyond speculation and scarcity, we have 3 concrete issues that the usage of Web3 solves if it makes sense, if the tokens can evolve or change based on what the user does with them. Yeah? We can reward players for their time by allowing NFTs to level up, and that drives retention. We can allow users to create user-generated content which can be sold on secondary markets, which not only increases retention, but also increases monetization. And finally, we can mix the world of Web 2 and Web 3 together to help build a community and help spread that message And that, of course, not only increases retention, but it also drives player acquisition. Problems that are solved, that need to be solved, and can be solved with the help of Web3 technology done right. And if we do that correctly, what we have when we add Web3 to this long tail is a graph that looks more like this. Suddenly, Web3 is increasing the monetization of the long tail rather than damaging it. The fact that we're allowing users to extract value from the economy actually is generating more value for the economy in the long run. And I think that's a very powerful tool to use. So what's stopping us from using earned value within the Web3 world? Why isn't everyone doing this? The fact is that there are two things that are kind of tricky to solve. The first is scale, and the second is the collectibles nature of things. Earlier on today, we were hearing about CryptoKitties, right? CryptoKitties, if you're not aware, in 2017 was one of the very first NFT games, based heavily on collectibles. Very, very basic gameplay, but kind of cool, kind of fun. Funnily enough, it was the inspiration for why we founded Freeverse. CryptoKitties had, at its peak, a few tens of thousands of daily active users, and when it did so, it crashed the Ethereum blockchain. Tens of thousands of DAU in the games industry is peanuts. So we skip forward 5 years, and we have a new blockchain game, again, kind of based on collectibles. More users this time, based on the acceleration layer for Ethereum, Polygon, reached nearly 500,000 weekly active users, and it crashed Polygon. I mean, that's fine, but have you checked how many users Fortnite has? The problem with scale is a really big one. The second problem is collectibles. NFTs are thought of by most people as these immutable collectibles. And what we're trying to do at Freeverse is move that discussion on. We're trying to make dynamic NFTs, we call them living assets, whereby the user actions affect the NFT properties and therefore affect its market value. What that does is it changes the discussion. We move away from this passive activity of collecting to an active engagement with the tokens and with the underlying game. Collectibles are fine in the sense that people do collect things in the real world, right? People collect stamps. People collect, I don't know, trading cards, guitars, whatever they collect. That's great. But the global economy is much more than just the collectible economy in the real world. And at Freeverse, we believe that the digital economy should also be much larger than just collectibles. There's an entire iceberg there waiting to be unveiled. And I think if we do that with living assets, with dynamic NFTs, then there's a massive opportunity there for both the games industry, the metaverse, and brands in general. And if we do that, we move the conversation away from the NFT conversation we've had over and over again. Speculation, scarcity, collectibles. Let's move it on to utility, earned value. So the value of the token is based on what the user is doing with it. Yeah, the actions of the user and the engagement of that user in the ecosystem as well. If we do that, we can actually add to Chris's initial vision of increasing the monetization. Chris Anderson's vision helped pioneer the free-to-play economy that we've seen, and we've moved away from pay up front to free-to-play, and we've seen the success and the impact that those approaches have had on the industry. If we can do the same with the Web3 world, we can move away from artificial scarcity, hype, boom and bust cycles to economies that are based on real value. And we can solve, most importantly, real problems in the games industry. We can increase retention, we can increase monetization, and we can increase engagement as well. This is kind of what we do at Freeverse. We're a layer 2 that exists on multiple different blockchains. All of our NFTs are living assets that are dynamic NFTs. They can scale and evolve as they are used. We allow all of our clients to charge a recurring revenue on every single time that NFT is traded. We're scalable. We can mint millions of NFTs at pretty much zero gas costs. We swallow all the gas costs. We're very eco-friendly in the sense that we're a layer 2. We can crunch many, many millions of transactions into one single one. And as is normal these days, we permit trading in pretty much any cryptocurrency, any native token, any ERC20 token, or any fiat currency, whether it's dollars or pounds, euros or yen. That's what we do at Freeverse, and that's the vision we're trying to bring to the games industry and to the Web3 world and the NFT world. My name is Alan Evans. Thank you very much for your time today, and you can reach me here.
All right, thank you for the great session, Alan. So we're going to be taking our lunch break now, and we'll be back at 1:30 p.m. Pacific to bring you a fantastic panel on incorporating DEI principles in the workplace. So lunch is available outside in the patio, and we'll see you back here at 1:30. Thanks.
launching Sky into new markets, we've had Google Analytics front and center of some of the decision-making processes.
One key part at the beginning was to look at users' review on the Play console so that we can be sure to have this connection with our players.
We use Google Ads to ask very specific questions, and this tells us where and how to spend money on advertising and find new players.
Enjoy new payment possibilities. Enjoy more per transaction. Enjoy expanding into new worlds. Enjoy it all across mobile, PC, and web. Enjoy the game. Welcome to Xsola, a global video game commerce company.